Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome, folks, to the Hungry Gamers, back with another game review, and today we're talking about Dungeon Crusade, designed by Roger Deering from Groovis Games. And thank you to Roger for providing me with this deluxe copy. The deluxe copy just means it has this little short game mode that I'm going to talk to you about included in the game as well. So, what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to start out and I'm going to give you an overview of how you play the Avalon Adventure game, which is the game that you can play before you play the main dungeon crawl itself. You kind of get to build up your characters a little bit and experience the world, learn about the lore of the world a little bit, and a kind of choose your own adventure style game, but that's not really the right way to put it. And what you see here is you see a game in progress. And then after that, I will talk a little bit about how the main game plays. And then at the end, I will give you my thoughts on kind of both of the games, how they work together, and what I think about them. And this is Future Hungry Gamer. I unfortunately had an issue with my recording, and my video footage of the main game did not save properly. So a little change to the plans of what I said I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to show you how this game works and then jump into final thoughts on both. And so what's happening here is you are traveling around trying to find the 3 runes that will unlock the dungeon so you can go in and save the world and all that. And most of the runes that you see out here are these blue runes, which are basically fake runes. And so you don't know exactly where they are. And so in this partial run through I've done here, you can see that I have found the green rune of power, and I have a single blue one because I didn't find it when I went looking. So I will just put that right back over there. And so this game is actually really, really simple as you're mostly just kind of learning about the world. So what's going to happen is, this is us right here. I'll lay that face down so you can see it a little bit better. And I get to choose where to go. I can go across the dotted lines, and you can move one space. So I'm going to move right down here to the Tomb of Balin. Then I go through the big ol' stack of cards here until I find the one for the Tomb of Balin. And then, since I haven't explored this area yet, I roll the d12. And when I rolled it up, that rolled way off the screen. I'll try that again. There we go. And I have a 9. So I take a look, and I flip it over, and I get to read 9. Randomly select a hero. Holding a torch high in front of him, this hero ventures into the very dark chambers of the tomb. And so, to randomly select one, I would roll the d6, and that would pick one of the heroes that I have. And the 2 I currently have assigned to my warlock right here. And you can see he's taking some damage along the way. And he's going to be the one that gets to do this. This hero ventures into a very dark western chamber of the tomb. Following the tattered, dirty red carpet on the floor, it leads to a small altar with an ancient dead king sitting on the throne. Test wisdom. And when you test wisdom, you get to roll a d20. And depending on your character, you will get to add their various skill bonus to it. So we'll go ahead and roll this. And a 1. It does not matter what my bonus is because a 1 is not going to cut it. On a success, the hero approaches the king and searches the area. Behind the throne is an elegant, ornate chest. Draw 1 loot card from the bronze chest deck. On a fail, the hero finds it unsettling and exits. Now, just for our understanding, let's just say that I had succeeded. Then I would go to the bronze loot deck over here, and I would draw the card. I wouldn't look at it. It would stay face down in front of me, and something that I get to look at and see what it is at the end of the game and gets carried over into the main game proper. But just so you can have an idea of what types of things we got, there we have it. So in this case, I will find out that I found the Myth of the Mind, and it has the cost over there. It costs 200 gold, and it's going to give +1 to my dice rolls on those 2 types of combat systems. And that'll make a little more sense when I talk about that. Then, now that that's done, I will mark that I have explored this area. And now the explored matters because if I come back, instead of rolling a d12, I'll only roll a d6. And you are more likely, with lower numbers, as you can see here, you're more likely to wind up having a battle with lower numbers. So it's dangerous to keep retracing your steps in the same place over and over again. Now, and that's pretty much what you're going to do. Each one of these locations has its own card with different things on it. Sometimes you're going to wind up getting into battles, and then every now and then you're going to wind up in a battle. And the battle combat is simplified in the Avalon Adventure game. And what's going to happen is it's going to very clearly tell you what the toughness of the bad guys are, and it's going to tell you to roll a d12. So let's say the toughness of a skeleton you're fighting is 7. You would roll the die, and you would add the related stat that the card tells you to, usually strength. And if you beat the toughness, it takes a damage. If you don't beat the toughness, you take a damage. Very, very quick, very, very simple. And you'll see that the combat is much more complex in the main version of the game. As you can see, all these different stats and abilities and things that you have here on the minion cards. But really, that's pretty much how the game goes. You're simply going to be moving around, doing your best to find these runes. You're going to be getting loot as you go. You're going to be getting treasure as you go, which will boost you when you start the main game. It is possible that you can die, and when you die, you're going to wind up marking something over here on the fate track. And if you get all the way to the end, I think you actually just lose if you get all the way to the end. But what's going to happen here is it's going to make the start of the game proper a little bit more challenging the more times you've been defeated as marked by the fate track. But there you have it. That's how this works. So what do I like about this game? And first off, I'm going to start out with the Avalon Adventure game. And I was originally going to do this in 2 separate videos, but that just doesn't make sense. Avalon is not a standalone game. It's like a mini game before the main game. So I'm going to talk all about Avalon, then I'm going to talk all about the core game, then I'm going to talk about kind of the way they come together and the value there. And who am I kidding? It's probably all going to be mixed up. Now, I am going to say that you did not see any footage, and you're not going to see any footage of my play of the core Dungeon Crusade game. And that's because, I don't know, I made a mistake, or just bad luck, or whatever it is, the footage just wasn't usable. And I'm sure I messed up somewhere. But whatever, I don't have it. But Roger was kind enough to allow me to pull some footage down from his YouTube channel just so I can illustrate the one thing that I really wanted to make sure that got illustrated in this game when it comes to talking about the fighting. But with all that said, let's jump into the Avalon Adventure game. So first off, what do I like about it? I really like, it's got a fun kind of story exploration vibe, and I really appreciate that. I really do appreciate that every different place that you go, something different's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. It might be good, it might be bad, and there's so many different places. You're going to be able to go through these places a lot and play it a lot of times before you start really feeling like you get a repeat, especially because for the most part, you're only going to visit each location once because you don't want the bad result, which you're probably going to get if you go back a second time. So you're going to go once, you're going to roll the die. There's like 6 or 7 options on each card that you might get. So there's a decent amount of times you're going to be able to go through this and not be hit with anything that you've seen before. The next thing I'll say is I really do like this way of buffing up your characters before you start. Or hurting your characters, because you can damage things and have people die and whatever. But I really do like that. I like this kind of way that you're kind of feeling out these characters. They're doing stuff, they're getting gear, they're getting loot, and I enjoy that. I think that's a lovely way to do that. And really, it takes about half an hour. It takes about half an hour to play through this once you know what you're doing. The last thing to say is it's a challenge. Surprisingly so. When I was first starting it, I was like, oh, this is just, I'm just going through the motions here. But the more times that I dug into it and went more places, I was like, oh, wow, this is getting hard. Oh, gosh, my person's getting hurt. Oh, gosh, I hope I roll high enough. And so it does have a little bit of tension and excitement there, and I enjoy that. So what are my quibbles with Avalon Adventures? The first one is the combat is very simplified. And especially compared to the core game, it tells you exactly what you're trying to roll, and that's what you're doing. It comes with this little battle board that you can use, but there's no point in using the battle board. As near as I can tell, maybe there are some quests that I just didn't see, cards I didn't see that actually have you do something, but the battle board doesn't do anything because it's not tactical combat. So you're going to roll the die That's it. You're going to track the damage. You just don't need the standees. You don't need the battle board. Again, as near as I can tell. Um, and along with that, you're not using any of your character abilities, which I think is the biggest miss here, because it's interesting abilities that are going on with these characters. So I wish that the combat was a little bit more like the core game combat there. Next thing I'm going to say is, and this is something you're probably going to hear later on, it's a very swingy game. It is very swingy. You are at the mercy of the dice rolls in every single portion of this game, period. You're going to go somewhere, there's no choices to make. You're going to go and you're going to roll that D12. If you roll a 1 or a 2, it's going to be bad. You roll an 11 or 12, it's going to be good. You roll a 5 through 7, it's probably going to be a nothing burger. So it's super swingy, and you just have to be prepared for that. There's nothing else I can say. It's just very swingy, and there's not a lot of mitigation in the simplified combat of Avalon Adventures. And then finally, I already kind of hinted at the cards. While I like the different levels and different adventures that you're going on, there are several levels in the middle, the kind of the 5 through 7 range, where just nothing happens. You get a little bit of story, but nothing happens. And I found in one of my plays that I was rolling 5 through 7 or something, or 6, whatever, 6 through 8, somewhere around there, like 7 cards in a row. And so I got a little bit of story, which is interesting, learn a little bit about kind of the world and all that, but nothing of value was happening. I wasn't getting buffed, I wasn't getting hurt, I was just moving along. And so with that swinginess, if you keep landing in that zone, you're going to feel like, well, I just did that for nothing. So just something to keep in mind. Now, moving into the core game of Dungeon Crusade, I have a lot more to say, and that's because there's a lot more going on in this game. So what do I like about it? First off, there is a ton of game in a not too big box. There is as much game in Dungeon Crusade as there is in Dungeon Universalis or League of Dungeoneers, but it's in a much smaller box. And so, now, don't get me wrong, this is not a small box, but considering the amount of game and table space this thing takes up, the amount of cards are in here, it's a small box. So I do like that quite a bit. I also really appreciate that you can play as 6 characters, which is the full complement that the game kind of recommends. And it's manageable. I mean, it's a lot. It takes up a lot of space, but you can do it because the way the characters play and the way they work, even when they start leveling up, it's very manageable. It's not overwhelming like you might get in some other games. Because I know in a lot of dungeon crawls, I usually tap out at about 3 characters because it's too much to manage for it to still be fun. But you can still do it. I mean, it's still a lot. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's nothing, but it is manageable. And I think for 6 characters to be manageable in a game this size, I think that is definitely a bonus, especially if you're a solo player like I usually am with dungeon crawls. There's some dungeon crawls I can get my group to play, but usually I'm playing them solo. So obviously if you're playing with multiple players, you can control 3 characters, whatever, that's no problem whatsoever. Next thing is there's a real sense of discovery in the rooms because you're seeding the rooms every different time that you play, and you have different little tiles in there. They're going to flip over, they're going to do different things, and it's going to be different based on the scenario you're on. It's going to be different based off of the quest within which part of the scenario you're doing, because you're kind of going to go into the dungeon 3 times as you're playing through. And I do think that there's a real sense of kind of what is going to be behind this door for a game that has a set board, as you're not kind of building out new tiles like you do with a lot of dungeon crawls. It's just, there's always something interesting behind each door. Even if there's nothing behind the door, it's exciting to find out that there is nothing behind the door. So I think that works really well. The next thing I'll say, actually the next 2 things I want to talk about here are what I consider to be the crowning achievement of Dungeon Crusade. The first one is, there is a lot of stuff in this game. There are a lot of rules and things you're doing and items you can get, and there's trading of stuff and mining of stuff and crafting of stuff, and there's all this stuff. There's so much stuff you can do in this game. But somehow the game does have a vibe where it doesn't feel overwhelming. Because I'll be the first to admit it, I like Dungeon Universalis. It can feel overwhelming when you play that. I love Madara, but it can feel overwhelming when you play that. This one doesn't feel overwhelming when you play it. Even though there's a ton of stuff, if I listed out all the different things that you can do and showed you all the stuff that comes with it, you'd feel like, oh my gosh, that's so much stuff. And so while it is still a lot, it feels that the vibe of the game just has this, yeah, and we're just going to keep on going and moving through it. And I do appreciate that in the game. But what I think is the most interesting to me is the patrol system. You have bad guys patrolling the dungeon, and you know how they're going to move, you know where they're going to go, sort of. And that I love. I think that is the crowning achievement of this game, is the way the patrol system works, the way the bad guys are kind of moving around here and there. So what are my quibbles with the game? The first one is it sprawls. I mean, it is huge when you get everything out there. And this has been well kind of documented. It's very hard for me to play it on my table in my back room, which is a 3x4 game topper. Hi, Berkey. But it's very hard for me to play it back there, especially if I'm going to be using all 6 characters. It's just a sprawling game with a ton of bits, a ton of chits, a ton of everything, and there's no organization in that box, which is part of why the box is able to be small. So it's a big setup, it's a big takedown. And along with that, there's, as I said, there's so many different bits. There's so many little tokens that do this and this and this and this and this, and it's just a lot. Next thing I'll say is that the rule book can be streamlined still. Now, this is the 2nd edition rule book, which I've looked at the 1st edition, and it is significantly improved. It's still too verbose. There is times when there would be 2 paragraphs written when really it could be a sentence and a bullet point list. And part of that, I think, is that's just who Roger is. If you have interacted with him anywhere, he is a very verbose human. He's a lovely, kind human, and he will tell you everything you need to know, and he will tell you everything you need to know in 8 sentences instead of 1 sentence. And that's who he is, and I don't fault him for that. But when it comes to the rule book, I wish it was more streamlined. Like, just tell me what's going on. Don't tell me that, just tell me what's happening. Tell me what to do. Don't tell me, well, this is why this is great. Let me decide what's great. Let the player decide what's great. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. That's all I want. Next thing I'm going to say is, and this one is really in the middle between a quibble and something that I particularly like, and that's the combat system. I think it's very interesting. It has a very interesting system where you are dealing with different styles of combat, and each character can fight a different way with each style of combat. They're better or worse at it, and each bad guy has different styles of combat, and so you're kind of randomly determining what style you're dealing with every time you face bad guys, and sometimes you do more than one on all of that, and your abilities can deal with things, and you're getting gear and loot that will boost your ability with these abilities. And along with that, you have the ability to kind of muster people and bring someone in to help you if they're close enough to kind of do the rock, paper, scissors of figuring out who's better at these combats. And it's pretty darn clever, along with that the abilities that you can interact with each character are pretty clever. Some can be only used in the hallway, some can only be used in the room. All of that's very clever. However, it's slow. It's this interesting collision of simple and slow. And I don't know that that's a bad thing, but it's just something for you to understand. Every time you go into a combat, it's going to be a moment, okay, I'm rolling these dice, I'm doing this, I had to make this, figure out which style we're going to use and which do I want to bring in a person. It is a slower combat system, and that's maybe something you're digging. It might not be something you're digging. So it's just something to be aware of. Last 2 things I'm going to bring out is, I already talked about how the Avalon Adventure is swingy. So is this. This is also swingy. Now, it is not as swingy as the Avalon Adventure game because you have a lot of mitigation. You're going to get gear that's going to boost your abilities. But at the end of the day, it is still a very swingy combat system. And you just have to be aware of that and enjoy that. So for example, I liked League of Dungeoneers a lot. I found that combat system to be very, very, very swingy. This one's very swingy as well. It's exciting, but it's swingy and just something to be aware of. And then the only thing that I'm going to bring up that is an actual disappointment to me is there's a lot of art in the game. There are a lot of characters that you can play. I believe it is 12 different characters that you can play. It might be 14, 12 or 14. There's no diversity in them. And I hope moving forward, as Roger makes more, that he considers that and we get more diversity into the gaming because I believe that's an important thing. Whether you agree or not, I believe in that, and I'm disappointed that it's not in this game. But there you have it, folks. That is Dungeon Crusade. And let me just say, this is, and I don't say this as a pejorative, I say this as a positive, this is a glorious mess of a game. This is so clearly one man's dream game that he has created. And it's fun. It's everything. But it is enjoyable. And so I can't fault that. I think this is a game that if you are considering getting one of the big three, I'm gonna call the big three kind of old school vibe sandbox dungeons. You got Dungeon Universalis, you got League of Dungeoneers, you got Dungeon Crusade. Those are the three. They're very different games, but they fall into that same feel. Then you just got to kind of dig in, watch some playthroughs, watch some videos. Do you like the combat system? Do you like that? Do you like how you're going to be kind of going all around through the dungeon and, oh, well, I'm out of potions. I'm going to send the dog up to the town to come back. By the way, I love that. I love that the dog can run around between players and carry potions and run up to the town. I think that's great. I should have mentioned that earlier. But is that what you want? Because this is very much almost a lifestyle game. It's close to a lifestyle game. I don't know that it's quite there, but this is a game that you're going to want to play 40, 50 times. And you can. It has enough content there to do it. But it's a commitment every time you do it. You have to kind of dig in, and there's a lot of things to learn. Even though it doesn't feel hard to do all the stuff, there's a lot of stuff to learn. And so you have to really dig into that. If that is what you're interested in, then I think it's a can't-miss game. But just be sure that's what you want. Also, I have to repeat, as I said before, Roger is very active in the dungeon crawling kind of community, and he's very quick to respond to things, and he's very appreciative of feedback and everything. But there you have it, folks. That is Dungeon Crusade. Thank you very much to Roger for sending me a copy. Like I said, it's a lot, but it is worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as Dungeon Universalis, League of Dungeoneers, and now Dungeon Crusade. They all live in the same world. It's just what flavor of this do you want? So, as always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.